Hi. Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner. I'm a critic, consultant, and programmer based in Toronto, and this is the other thing I do. My guest this week is Catherine Legault, a documentary filmmaker whose editorial credits include Fanny the Right to Rock, Rebels on Point, Family Demolition, and many more. She's also a director of documentaries, and her new feature, Larry, They, Them, accompanies non-binary trans photographer Laurence Philomène as they assemble their first book, Puberty, which itself documents their transition during hormone therapy. It's now available to stream in Canada on CBC Gem, and it'll reach other regions sooner or later, and you should check it out. Catherine picked another documentary, Cutie and the Boxer, Zachary Heinzerling's 2013 study of the relationship between aging Japanese painter Ushio Shinohara and his much younger wife and assistant Noriko, and what happens as Ushio's career starts to slow down and Noriko no longer has to do her work in his shadow. It's a story about love, commitment, parenthood, aging, trust, ego, vulnerability. It's about everything, really. Good choice. This is Someone Else's Movie.
I discovered Cutie and the Boxer while I was actually working on my first film, and it connected in many ways about the process, the themes, the aesthetic, and also I've been a film editor for more than 20 years, but at the time it was like my coming out as a filmmaker, and I wasn't totally solid in that new role. I think I watched it at Hot Docs when it came out. So the two protagonists were there with the filmmaker, Zachary Heinzerling.
Oh, wow.
And I fell in love with the subjects. I loved the film, and it stayed with me throughout the years. And I watched it again before our conversation. And I think it still remains an inspiration, and it still applies on my new film coming out now, which is also very different, but there are different aspects of it that relate.
I can see that. Yeah, they're to collapse it to the most basic version. Both Larry, They, Them, and Cutie and the Boxer are about people who insist on living life as they want to, and the world sort of adjusting itself around them. But we get to see, in both cases, we see the protagonist through the eyes of someone who turns out to be the real protagonist, I think. Certainly in Cutie and the Boxer, we're watching Noriko reshape the narrative that Ushio is trying to construct for himself as it's happening. And the film, editorially, I think it's really smart the way that the film just slowly, it opens with her narrative, with her illustrations animated, but it takes a little while to make us see how she's always telling the truth and Ushio is always self-aggrandizing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a very rare intimate access in this couple's life. Their dynamic is very interesting. They're both witty, and there's an interesting shift in the trajectory of both of them, and also it affects their couple's dynamic. So I thought it's really lovely the way it's depicted. Just the creative process is one thing, showing two struggling artists in New York, but also how they support one another, and how, as you mentioned, Noriko sometimes has some resentment. At the beginning, she's the assistant, and Ushio is saying that she has to support the genius. So it really sets up both of their personalities. But you see them growing, and you see their deep love for one another, which I find is very beautiful and rare. And they are so authentic. They are not shy of the camera, and they actually forget about the camera. I really relate with the observational cinema that Zachary developed in his film, and also I love his animation and how the main subject becomes a collaborator along the way. And I've done the same thing in both my films. So I had a lot of connection on that aspect the creative process. And also filming myself, like artists, contemporaries, and as you said, like people that devote themselves to their art, no matter what, and are very engaged in what they're doing.
Yeah, it's fascinating to just point the camera at someone who is creating. I've always found, like, just because I'm a process nut, I want to see how things happen and why people make the choices they make. And that's the thing that you can never really explain, right? It all happens internally. But watching Ushio hammer away at this grotesque sculpture of a motorcycle, but it's always recognizable. You can see what he's doing as he's doing it, even though it makes no sense visually to look at it. And then there's that wonderful little moment where they're trying to push it into the gallery in Tribeca, and it won't go through the doors just because it's not really a motorcycle. It's this distortion, and people are sort of grappling with it for maybe it's only 30 seconds. It's a very short clip, but I find it absolutely fascinating. Everybody is trying to tilt it and move it the way they would move an ordinary real thing. They've already accepted that this version of a motorcycle is a motorcycle. It just, all they have to do is take it apart and put it back together again. But you can't do that with a real motorcycle, so they won't try it. And then,
but then you see the resourceful, like how resourceful Ushio is.
Yes.
About moving his own piece and like finding solutions. So I thought it's always interesting to see them in action.
Yeah. It's someone who has a relationship to his work that no one else can have. Mm-hmm. But also that gift is the thing that does seem to get in his way more often than it helps him. He's constantly undervaluing himself and just trying to get whatever he can. There's a conversation about a piece of art being worth at least $10,000, and he'll settle for $3,600 because it smells. The bills are fresh and they smell nice. and we very quickly realize, like, these people don't, Ushio and Noriko don't have to be living the way they are. Those are choices that one of them made.
Yeah, but I think it shows the reality of artists as well. Like all of the sacrifices one has to make a living and to devote their life to art, and to every sacrifice they have to make. And at one point, like, they have also to make hard decisions because they have to make a living. Mm-hmm. And so I think it shows that in a very genuine way. And it's often like heartbreaking but funny at the same time, and sweet. So it has like I often have like those mixed emotions watching them.
Yeah, they definitely understand one another's needs in a way that gets in the way of their comfort, I think. And there, so much of it too is tied up in the it's a cliche, it's a trope, but it's also sort of this inherent societal understanding that artists should be indulged and be allowed to do whatever they want because the art is worth whatever suffering they inflict on their family and friends. And the thing I really like about Cutie and the Boxer is that it does not shy away from the damage that's been done. You're right. The love story is genuine. The two of them have been together for 40 years. 40 years at a point in time too when the age difference between them was pronounced, and now it seems to be equalizing because it's only she was 19 and he was 41. It's a 22-year age difference, which when you get to your 50s and 60s is less dramatic. But it's also this sort of internalized thing is that at the time that they met, that was perfectly reasonable and normal, and Woody Allen was making movies about it right around the same time, and would still be doing now if he hadn't gotten too old. But it's all mythology, right? It's almost all of these relationships are idealized or fantasy, and they don't work out. And here is something where these two people they're genuinely bonded, and it doesn't appear to be miserable. Like, she's not resentful of what she's given up.
I think it shaped them, if anything. Like it, both their choices and also like their relationship. Like it's their trajectory. Like even Noriko says at one point that her family stopped sending money when they discovered what was happening in New York. So like they inflict themselves their lifestyle, but at the same time they embrace it.
Yeah. I mean, they're each other's world in a really specific and kind of non-parasitic way. I couldn't tell if, I mean, he clearly started their relationship in a position of power and taking advantage of her, and to the point where, in 2012, when he does have his show and then decides just to go off to Japan, she says, "You always do this." Like, it's a
Mm.
history, but it's not a self-destructive relationship. The two of them do seem to genuinely get something from each other, in this odd little bubble they've built for themselves in Brooklyn in their tiny shabby apartment, which uh, has enough room. I mean, obviously, this is one of the other things, right? Real estate becomes its own whole thing in an artist relationship. You need studio space, you need your own space. She needs her space, he needs his, and somehow in the middle of it, they have a life. They build a life where they don't kill each other, where like where they are capable of working separately. And the tiny little, I don't think it's a tragedy that it takes Noriko so long for her work to be noticed, because in a weird way, the history, the decades are what make the art meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
But watching her start to experience some small level of success, and then the way Ushio does not handle that well at all, is really telling. He can't handle not being the center or the sole center of attention. And he's, as much as he professes that she is his rock and that he wouldn't be where he is without her, he really does not want to be able to say, "Oh, look, yeah, she's an artist too." He's constantly deflecting, and that becomes more and more. I only saw it on a link, I think, or maybe even a DVD at the time. What was it like to see it with a crowd? What was the audience's response when they came out at the end?
I think everybody loved it. And as you mentioned, like Noriko is really emancipating herself. So everybody was like really supporting her. And Ushio was really funny. Like I think if I remember well, like he had his boxing glove and was just like jumping.
Sure.
But everybody was cheering. Like it was a very nice atmosphere from what I remember. But I feel like it really shows like how one can express oneself through art and how it allows her to really like break through and to connect with her past and maybe make peace with it as well. Because that's a lot of how we learn about their backstory and their relationship and their son. So it's really interesting to see how it empowers her.
Yeah. Well, and bringing up her son too, who is in his, what, 30s, I guess, but when we see him, and seems to have inherited some of the same
Mm-hmm.
issues.
Yeah, mimicking the drinking problem of his dad, who is not drinking anymore, but he's a very talented artist as well. But yeah, like you can feel that he's stuck in the same pattern.
Cycle. Yeah. Again, it's another thing that could be a cliche if the film was less sensitive about how it depicts it, but the cliche of the child of artists going into the same thing and then just being caught up in the same patterns and repeating things. There is a, I don't know that his artwork is derivative of his parents. When we see it, it feels more like a synthesis of the two.
Mm-hmm.
But it is still the whole thing where, of course, he was raised around this. Of course, he'd want to do it, and probably does have some natural talent for it. But you're in the shadow constantly of your parents' work, and what kind of a life does that offer you? You have to, it's horrible. It's not like he has to wait for his parents to die, but certainly he won't be able to transcend them until he can completely separate himself from them. And that's clearly not going on here. I should have checked on this. Actually, it's been 12 years. I'm curious to see where he ended up.
It made me curious to know more about the son, actually. Yeah. And I don't know like how much access the filmmaker had with the son, if he was just like a presence or if he actually had like a more private access with him. But I was curious. Yeah, I didn't look him up.
Yeah. No, there is no I mean, there really is no talking head stuff in the film. It's not about sitting them down in front of a formal
Mm-hmm.
space and interrogating them as to what their footage means. But yeah, I get the sense that he's only around when the cameras catch him. He's not living with them. Clearly, he comes and goes
Mm-hmm.
and has some other place where he lives. But he also doesn't seem terribly interested in talking to or about himself at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's more private. Yeah.
Yeah, which is another thing that you can't really account for when you start making a project like this. You don't know who will and won't talk to you, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just pure luck that both of his subjects are so chatty and so open. But I suppose that is why the movie is what it is. It's not just the access, it's the honesty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember like I was talking with Zachary, the filmmaker at the time, because I was trying to raise money for my own film, and I was asking because we shared like the connection. I was filming like two also struggling artists at the time, much younger sisters, and their inspirations. And I remember him telling me that it started getting interest when he filmed that scene in the kitchen with the two of them just chatting with one another, and it's really like that bond and how their personalities came across that really made the audience connect with the film. And that's when he decided to like really take that trajectory more seriously, because as you mentioned, like there are many struggling artists, so what makes this story particularly interesting? And I think it's them as a couple, their personality, but also how it unfolds as the story evolves, how their connection evolves
Yeah.
to one another.
Yeah, and the more we see of how they interact with each other, the more we're pulled in. Obviously, there is this really
Mm.
uncomfortable intimacy in some scenes where you just feel like we shouldn't be part of whatever the conversation is, and
Right,
then it
like
turns.
showering and or brushing their teeth or those kind of things, like very mundane, everyday life moments. But I can relate to that now with my new film, which is all about that.
I was
Which
going to say,
yeah, like very intimate day-to-day life and all of those mundane moments and just washing the cat or those kind of little things. But it's very telling at the same time of who they are.
yeah. Well, and the stuff that we feel we shouldn't see is obviously the stuff that's most interesting because it's the stuff they don't ordinarily put in
Mm-hmm.
documentaries. The quiet interactions and the close. It's a great way of conveying just how close their quarters are, and you never really get a sense of living space, right? People are
Mm-hmm.
coming in and out of rooms, but here it's this tiny bathroom, this terrible bathtub, which they've clearly used for decades and don't notice anymore. But you can't stand up and shower in it. It's just not possible. And that thing in the back of your mind that says, oh, it's almost squalid. When you're thinking about like an artist garret in Paris and the romantic version never looks like this, but this is what it looks like to live for your art and as
In New
successful
York
as you can
City,
be in New
yeah,
York. Yeah. And
in a tiny space, yeah.
yeah, you can be incredibly successful, but you still go home to what's effectively a hovel.
It probably affected the way it was filmed as well. Just I think he filmed it himself, and but just the very small space and the close-ups or the proximity with the subject probably is part of that as well because of their own apartment.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's shots where someone's clearly crouched in a corner to catch the whole room. It's like shooting a bad real estate photograph and make it look bigger.
Right.
But it also forces us into their lives in a way, or forces the camera into their lives in a way that might not have been possible with a bigger space. And yeah, it absolutely works. This it's not claustrophobic exactly because they don't respond to it that way, but we always feel like, or at least I always felt like I was creeping up on their privacy, that I was infringing on their space.
Mm. Yeah, but somehow it never felt invasive.
Mm.
Because it felt like they were welcoming the filmmaker into their world and happy to share their own life and their own ideas and insights. So I never felt like I was in the wrong place in the wrong time. Like it felt like it was just, I was close to them. Yeah, it brought me closer to them, but never felt like it was invasive.
Yeah, they're always welcoming of the camera. They're never hostile to it, but you do feel like it's cramped in a good way, I think, in a way that makes you feel like it's comfortable or cozy.
Mm-hmm. That's probably how they feel about one another. Like they feel cramped but cozy at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, you have to love someone very much to spend your whole life in a tiny space with them.
Mm-hmm.
I would hope.
Plus a baby at the
And
time.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's telling that she has she depicts all of the child raising as exteriors, taking them to the park and going outside, and that's all sketched
Mm-hmm.
in
Yeah.
very simple detail. But we don't see a lot of her indoors with the baby because I can't imagine that would have been easy for all of them.
It was her escape, probably.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the other thing about Noriko's art. We get so much insight into. I mean, they're so simple. Basically, caricature line drawings, very simple facial depictions, but not simplistic because there's so much going on in the mural she draws, where it's a series of progressions
Mm-hmm.
on a massive scale, but it's still very simple figures telling that story. Is again something that is only hers. She works in two dimensions. He works in three. There's a really interesting barrier between their disciplines,
Mm-hmm.
and visually it's depicted in a really interesting way as well because her stuff gets to come to life and his stuff never does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting what you just said. Well, I'm curious to know like how she felt about seeing her own work coming to life. I think it really gives it justice, and it really brings like a different perspective to the film. I think it's really strong narratively to include that in the
Mm-hmm.
film, because as you said, like we see Ushio's art in the foreground all the time, and it's very colorful and massive, like it's very big, so it takes a lot of place. Um, so it's and also like we see her taking her stand about her own work after all of those years. So it's I think it's very powerful to have the illustrations, like the all of the drawings or paintings animated, and then it's yeah, even though it's like in black and white, so his work doesn't come alive, but it's very colorful. But then her work is black and white, but then becomes moving images.
The thing I did notice too is that we are given a sense of how long it takes for Noriko to create something, and the film deliberately opens with that real time shot of Ushiro just boxing out a painting, and
Mm-hmm.
it takes 4 minutes, and then he walks away, and it's not careless. It's clearly what he does. And someone even says when the Guggenheim people come to visit and say, oh, well, Pollock would crouch over them and you just go right at it. And I couldn't tell if they were insulting him or not. I don't think they were, but the sense that it's not terribly controlled and that is his gift, that he can turn chaos into art, is really interesting. Whereas Noriko needs to be very deliberate and very focused to the point where she hesitates on that little cloud that she creates before the animation even starts, when she's just sort of almost touching it with the brush and then pulls back and then gets the right angle on it. It's so thoughtful, and it just, what a great way to create the simple divide between these two people. This one is this way and this one is
Mm-hmm.
the other way, but we only see it through their work. When they're together, they argue at the same rate, they speak at the same pace, they really do have a sort of shared movement and language.
Mm-hmm.
But when they work, it's completely different. And he needs her to be there, and she doesn't need him.
Mm-hmm. Right, because he likes being looked at.
Yeah.
I think like the shot you're referring to, like I think it's very powerful just as a filmmaking choice to just have one long take, one angle, and see the process. And right at the beginning as well, I think is very strong. And then it comes back a couple of times. And when we see the painting, then we know what it refers to.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was a very powerful choice to do that this way. And I love, like, I did that also in my first film, like just one long take where you see like the photographer Laurence, who's now the subject of my next film, but you see just the photo session unfolding, and then you see the subject just moving in that frame. And instead of cutting in close-ups and getting closer, you just see how it unfolds naturally in the frame. And at the end of the film, like they do the same thing, but then it's like slow motion. So they kind of crafted it a different way, which was very beautiful as well. But I really like that one long take, just camera not moving. And sometimes, like also as a film editor, like I have sometimes you want to cut in closer or you want to change angle, and sometimes you just need one take or you just need one angle. Like I know we as filmmakers, like we film many different things and we film many different angles and many different options, but in the end it's not always the best storytelling. It's not the best way to convey the story.
Hey, it's Norm, interrupting my own show to bring you up to speed on Shiny Things, my newsletter about physical media, culture, and the Odd Streaming Project. Last week, I tackled the new release of Bring Her Back from A24 and Elevation, and Warner's 4K upgrade of The Conjuring, the James Wan creeper, which is also about a haunted house. Sign up for a 14-day free trial at shiny-things.ghost.io, or find a link at the Sendcast Blue Sky account. You like reading about movies? I like writing about them. Come check it out. The one take thing, especially with digital now, I remember Sarah Polley telling me with Take This Waltz, which is the first film she shot digitally, she could just let the camera run for 20 minutes to the point where the actors would get so relaxed that they would start to drop character just a little bit. And that tension between performance and existence was the thing that she wanted the most in the scenes she shot that way. And now audiences are used to, I think there's two shows right now there's some series on Netflix about child abuse or something that takes place in each episode is a single take, and I can't remember the title, Vengeance or something. Is that it? Ambivalence, Vengeance, some elaborate title. And Seth Rogen's show, The Studio, is also shot. Every scene is shot in a single take, and there's an episode, the one with Sarah Polley in it, which is the whole episode is a oneer. And audiences are getting more and more literate, I think, to the way stories are told and why they're told that way. And with digital now, you can also fix problems invisibly and stitch scenes together or stick shots together, so that something like the True Detective oneer that happens every season now, because it did so well the first time that everybody keeps doing it, is the language that we've internalized. But those shots are moving and they're telling stories in different ways and sometimes complicating themselves because the pace of a moving shot means something can't happen immediately the way maybe an edit would help. But with this, with a lockdown single take of watching someone create something, it pulled me in rather than pushed me away. I was absolutely fascinated to see, oh no, he's going to do the entire width of this thing and he's just going to keep going.
Well, the risk-taking is higher, right?
Yes, because you're asking so much of the audience.
Yeah, but also if something goes wrong during that take, then you're stuck with it, right? You cannot cut away, or you could jump cut, or you would probably make other creative decisions to resolve, like to fix the problem. But yeah, it's a risk taking. But I think it's taking a stand, which with the digital world now, like we take less and less risk, or we cover ourselves too much and we don't think ahead as much as filmmakers used to.
Sure.
And like we think like, oh, we're just gonna film without the purpose, and then we'll figure it out, So I think it's good sometimes just to ask yourself, like, what do I want to show? How do I want to show it? And how is it serving the story and the narrative overall?
Oh, and you're an editor and a director. So do the disciplines, does switching from one discipline to another change the way you approach something? Or when you're cutting someone else's project, do you feel like obviously your choices are more limited since you weren't on set, but as a director, do you go in with the idea, especially in documentary where you kind of don't know what's going to happen from shot to shot or even as it's happening? Mm-hmm. Do you frame with an eye towards cutting yourself out of the story or into the story?
Well, it's very different to edit someone else's film than editing my own film. It has both have their own challenges. Mm-hmm. If I'm cutting for another filmmaker, of course, I'm editing their vision, so I'm giving my input and bringing all of my creative and craft, but it's still for their film. As a film editor, editing my own film as a filmmaker, wearing different hats, was also challenging, because it's important to always keep perspective on your work. Sure. And so that was always a challenge, but because I had compositing and animation, and also I had editor, advisor, I guess. We had the 3 or 4 sessions together, and also my producer. So I always were really aware that I needed everybody's input. And then of course you make your decisions, but you're aware of if you're too close from your subject. But of course, thinking about my film, I was already thinking about the structure and the narrative arc and, the different things I might need to tell the story or to bridge the scenes or those kind of things. So I was filming maybe with more purpose in that way. But then you have so much footage that in the end, and also it's, even though as much as you script it, when you get in the editing room, you cannot, you can never know how people are going to say things, how scenes are going to unfold. And it was always better than what I had imagined. So of course, you work with the material and then you adjust according to that. And sometimes you think something is going to work and then it doesn't have the same power when it's after it has been filmed, or maybe for one way or another it was not filmed the best way could have, or you always have the production stories, the backstories that people don't see. So it's still something to work on when you edit, and I still worked months on the editing, even though I had more insights of the story I wanted to tell.
And you'd said that when you talked to Heinzerling about your own project that you were working on, was this in 2013 when he was at Hot Docs? Had you been working on your first film for that long? Because that's 6 years before it came out, right?
Yes, I did. Wow. Well, it was actually, I think, 7 years in the making. But from the point that I had the idea, started filming myself, trying to raise the money, and then, before we got to Iceland, which was a big point, in the narrative arc, it took longer than I expected. And then I had a baby and the film was not finished. So everything kind of got delayed. But altogether it was 7 years in the making. And also because it was, I would say 3/4 founded, but then I invested a lot of time and money myself in that first film. So when you don't have the money, you put time. And if you put time, then you work full time on someone else's film. So I was also working nights and weekends. So it was a different dynamic than this one. My new film, Larry, They, Them, I was invested fully, for 3 years working on the film.
But you knew Larry from the first film, so that relationship stretches back much further.
Yeah.
I don't want to abandon Cutie and the Boxer just yet, but I am fascinated by the interplay of your work and that film, in that they're both about pushing in to understand, right? To watch someone at work, but also to see who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And in both cases, when you've made a film, it's been about an artist and about the specific confluence of life and fortune, right? To be able to get where any of us ends up, we have to be incredibly lucky at one point or another. Just if you're working in any kind of creative field, I mean, my God. So that's sort of something else too. Like if the camera wasn't present in Cutie and the Boxer, if we didn't have that film, I don't know that Noriko's work would be taken as seriously, simply because we see where it comes from in a way that we wouldn't if we were just reading a graphic novel or walking past a gallery. Your films are similarly illuminating, I think, is a fair way to say it, because the work that your subjects do could stand alone, and does, but it's much more interesting to me, at least, when I know where it comes from. I guess that you could say that about any documentary, but I've seen some pretty disappointing documentaries, so I don't think that's true.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you how do you win people over in the first place to let them accompany you, to let you accompany them?
Well, for Laurence in Larry They Them, like, we've known each other for about 10 years, but we didn't know each other personally, but they were part of the same artist circle I was filming in my first film. Okay. And I hired them a couple of times, so that's how we met in the first place. They're part of my first film, like, we see them from behind in that photo session, and their photo actually became the poster of the film. So we had that relationship. And when I discovered their, I knew about their work, but every project is different, even though it's about like non-conforming gender identities. Like when I discovered their work about their own transition, it was they made a coming out on the Instagram and posted like different photos, very intimate self-portraits, very colorful, and it was all with short captions describing what we were seeing. So just like a bedside table, or just having breakfast in bed, or prepping for my tea shot. And I thought it was very cinematic, very beautiful and colorful, but also very powerful in its subject. And I thought it was a great way to learn more about who they are, their hormonal transition, and also as an artist. So that's what pulled me in the first place. And then a little bit like Noriko, like with Laurence, as we watch their creative process and as we tag along with the making of their book, then we get to know more about who they are. And I think that there was like this very vulnerable and intimate aspect of their life that was already in their project. And so, like, at first I was discussing with Laurence, asking a lot of personal questions that were not necessarily relevant for the film, but I wanted to know as a filmmaker where the narrative was going and what was to expect. So we had a lot of like open and transparent conversations, and also we discussed about the nudity, because nudity is part of their book, and it's shown in a very frank and natural way. I wanted the film to do the same, which is somehow unusual in documentary. It's not something we see often, but it was important for the project. So we had conversations to make sure that they felt comfortable about that. And also I asked myself a lot of questions about how I was going to depict their story, and in a respectful way, non-invasive way, non-voyeuristic way, but also like I wanted the film to have its own aesthetic and to have its own style. So like, even though I was inspired from their work and the framing and the subjects and, you know, all of the leitmotifs that come back in their photography, but I wanted also the film to be an object of its own with its own style. And so that's why we develop more like the observational style with the camera, but then we kind of blur the lines sometimes, and so we're not sure which camera is capturing the moment. So sometimes we see Laurence's photographies, but we animated them a little bit with like cinemagraphs, like 2D, 3D animations. Also with the like social media, which is part of Laurence's life, and it's part of their one of the platforms they use to share their work. So we included that in the film as well. So it was interesting to discover like how was the best way to get to know Laurence through that process.
It is it's always an interesting proposition to accompany an artist on that sort of personal, especially when it's so personal work, and to find a way that to find your own, to use your own language to capture someone else's expression. And Cutie and the Boxer does it. Larry They Them does it. It's this really odd alchemy of perspective, I suppose. This is the problem. Words don't really cover it, but you know it when you see it. You know when you're seeing someone from the outside versus from the inside. And given that so much of your film is about who someone is, the inside-outside thing sort of blurs away because you're seeing the process of creating a person in a way that we rarely get to see. And I guess that's it too. I mean, you may have known each other for 10 years, but it's still a huge trust that they've placed in you to film this. Did you collaborate in the post-production process? Were they part of the edit?
They were not part of the editing process. Every time I was filming, like I decided to go with half days, because if you're filming someone for like 10 hours a day, at one point it's not natural anymore. So usually we were filming like 5 hours at a time. And every time that I was filming, I was asking Laurence to make a self-portrait of themselves. So this became, I guess, a collaboration. It was like they had, the choice of the self-portraits they were going to do that day. And then I made some selections during the production, the post-production. And I showed the film to Laurence, Nina, their partner, and their good friend, Lucky, when it was like almost a fine cut, like it was like pretty advanced rough cut, let's say. And yes, it was important for me to have their approval and to make sure that they felt comfortable with everything that was shared about themselves. And I remember Laurence telling me about like sharing that they were not stressed about how they are depicted, but they were mostly stressed about the scenes I filmed with their parents. And that was because that's something they were not part of, and they were really curious to see how it unfolded. But I think they feel really good about the film, and the parents also. And I think the process of the film helped them connect better.
That's really interesting.
Like the parents struggled about their child's transition, and it was like there are like very emotional scenes in the film with the parents sharing how they feel about like sometimes you think that you're really open, but then your heart is struggling with what your brain can think. And so I thought they were really open and honest about how they were feeling, and it really brings something powerful to the film. And also, like not every trans person has the family support, so I thought it was very important to show that despite the tension and the conflict and the difficult times and challenges, like they still love one another and support Laurence as a person, as an artist, and now their relationship got much better.
Well, that's great. I mean, I did. It struck me watching Cutie and the Boxer again that the scenes of them at their dinner table in the 80s and 90s when they're much younger, the home videos of of a breakdown happening just out of nowhere. It's so volatile, and it's the kind of thing that in my brain I was like, oh, where did you get this? How do they trust you with this? And of course they gave it to him. That's the only way you can include something like this in a film. But that level of trust in the filmmaker that they're going to use this volatile piece of tape in a way that leads us to understanding rather than for spectacle is just, I guess that's something you do towards the end of the shoot when you know you can trust the filmmaker. But that sort of codependence that emerges between filmmaker and subject is something that I've never really experienced other than through the medium of a finished film. And yeah, it's so painfully intimate to capture something like that. And yeah, what you do with the way that the footage of the parents is integrated into the doc is you're pushing towards understanding rather than sensationalism. And I guess that's ultimately the only way you can tell a story like this. But it works so well.
Thank you.
Of course.
Yeah, I remember the scene you're referring to with Ushio, and it's really heartbreaking when he's crying and he says that he has nothing.
Yeah.
I think like the trust is something so deeply important in documentary filmmaking, and it's something that you build as a filmmaker with your subjects, and it's always something that you need to reaffirm as you're filming, because the production span so for so long that one could change their mind, and it happens. That's why people have releases signed. But like, even though, like, even if you have a release and someone doesn't endorse doesn't believe in the film and doesn't want something, then just as a human, person, and just in a respectful way, like you don't show something that someone would not feel comfortable. Well, it depends what kind of film you're making, but that kind of film, which is a film about like character-driven story and so intimate, then there would be no way I would show something that they would not be comfortable showing. But then, of course, like if they would question something and I thought it was important or relevant, then I would probably have a conversation. But luckily, like it was, I think Laurence understood the process as a photographer. Like they're used to like what it means to be in front of a camera, and they are used themselves to be in front of a camera. So there was no being camera shy moment with Laurence. So that was like really great for that. But also, yeah, I think they understood the process and what they were getting into from the beginning. And as I said, like I was always transparent and, sharing what I was going for. So, and like also Laurence is telling their own story in their book. So I wanted to bring like this new perspective. That's why also like there's like this social political context that kind of supports the context in which they are living and in which they are creating. And I think like right now it makes even more sense with everything that is happening in the political sphere and everything that shifted in the past few months. I think it becomes even more important to show and just share that like the diversity of different like the
just experience.
Trans experiences and the diversities of bodies and the different ways people can have and live their own transition.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you showed it at Slam Dance exactly 1 month after Trump got back into power. And what was the atmosphere like? And a month later, it's even worse, obviously. But what was the atmosphere like? I mean, I would assume that would be a pretty supportive crowd, even so.
It was pretty supportive. I think people were just saying that it was very important because of everything that was happening. So it's like if the film, it's like the reception of the film was different than what it was, in 2024 when it first came out, because perspectives were not the same. So yeah, it was very interesting, and just also like being interviewed by journalists and how they felt it was important to talk about it and to share the different stories. And yeah, it felt really good actually to be in the United States in that specific moment. Even though I kind of wasn't sure how the film reception was going to be after Trump was elected, like if it was going to change people's perception about it. But I think it's for the better, because we need those kind of stories right now. So regardless of, the film's trajectory, like I think those kind of stories are just important to share and to show. And it's not because some government body suddenly says that there are only two sexes, masculine and, men and women, that this is what it is. Like it doesn't change the reality.
I agree. I mean, we screened a film called Really Happy Someday at TIFF last fall, and it's this really elegant, simple metaphor for transition. It's about a trans musical performer trying to master his new voice, because on testosterone he can't hit the notes he used to hit, and previously
I think I saw that film. What's the title again?
It's called Really Happy Someday. With it's Jay Stevens' film with Breton Lalama, and it's the one with it's the song from, what is it? My Favorite Places. It's from a musical that I don't know, but it's the one where over and over again you see the character Z spending time with his voice coach and trying to figure it out. And it was shot almost in a documentary format. They spent a year shooting on weekends, and month after month would catch Breton's actual voice training sessions with a real voice coach, and he's acting, but he's not acting. And it's when he hits this note at one point, the look on his face is real. And there's no, like, it was like a lightning bolt with the audience each time I saw it with the crowd, and they were just like, you could feel it. And it strikes me that there's nothing more effective in terms of cinema than showing people how people exist. Just people without any no musical score to tell you how to feel, no careful run up, just honest footage of a person living their life seems to be the most effective way, of short of getting to know that person in the flesh, to communicate reality to people and show them that the world is more complicated than you think it is. Not that I think Trump is ever going to see any of these films. He only apparently watches the fight scenes from Bloodsport. But yeah, I don't know that obviously his election has made things worse, but I think the only thing it's really done is allow people to be their worst selves and have express the prejudices they already harbor. And so it feels to me like art is the best way to push back at that, by just saying, look, you're not right. This is the way people live, and this is how it is, and nothing you say is going to change that. It's just going to scare people.
I see the film now as like a social and cultural object of resistance, almost.
Absolutely.
If I may, maybe just say something about the tone shifting that you were mentioning, because I worked with a trans person from the north of California to work on the original soundtrack of the film called The Wise. And it's the same thing. Like when he started his transition, it was about the same time when Laurent started their own transition as well. And I discovered this song, I'm Not a Girl, I'm Not a Boy, on Bandcamp. And I thought it was a perfect fit for the film, and it became like the credit song for the film. But then when we got to know one another better, I invited him to collaborate on the soundtrack, and we flew to California to record with him. So we had like a full week of production, recorded all of the guitars and the voices and all of that. But then when it came to that song, like he didn't have the masters anymore, and also like his voice shifted, and it Now he still performs it in different shows, but he cannot sing it the same way. So we re-recorded it with his new voice and new key, especially for the film. And I thought it was a beautiful way also just to show like trans experience in a different way. Like people don't know that unless like I tell the story. But I thought it was a beautiful moment. And he was really grateful of that as well.
That's wonderful. And again, just more representation, more expression, just putting things on film or video just helps, I think, right now, especially. The more content, the better. I hate that I just used the word content.
The more stories, the better.
Oh, yeah, let's do that. We'll go with that. My thanks to Catherine Legault, whose new documentary, Larry, They, Them, is now available to stream for free on CBC Gem in Canada. It should be turning up in other countries fairly soon. Keep an eye out. Thanks also to Carolyn Rompre. She knows what she did. You can find Catherine on Instagram at Kate_Legault, and you can find Cutie and the Boxer on Blu-ray and DVD from Anchor Bay Entertainment. It's also streaming on Hoopla in Canada and on Plex and Fandango at home in the US, and available to rent or buy on various VOD services across North America. You can find me on Blue Sky at Norm Wilner, and you can find this podcast there at Semcast, SEMcast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. The first year of the show is still available for just $20 at payhip.com/Semcast. That's the first 52 episodes of Someone Else's Movie, 41 of which aren't currently available anywhere else. And check out my newsletter, Shiny Things, at shiny-things.ghost.io. I think you'll enjoy it. Our theme song is by The Last Year. If you like it or the show in general, please say so. Leave a review wherever you've been listening. Every little bit helps. It truly does. And check out the other shows on the Frequency Podcast Network while you're doing that. Stay safe, watch movies, get the boosters while you can. I'll see you next week.